I'm not the one who got you fired.
I know that. I never blamed you.
It's car con carne. Let's eat in the car. It's car con carne. And now here's the star of our show, James Van Alstyne.
It is Car Con Carne, the world's only food podcast recorded in a car. Today it's recorded in a rental car, and my guest is the inimitable, really a legend in Chicago radio, Johnny Mars.
Hi, JVO, or do you prefer James? I never call you JVO.
You never call me JVO.
Does anybody call you that?
A lot of people.
Okay.
My close friends call me James.
James.
Yeah. And I realize we're at a place called Amitabul. Amitabul?
Amitabul, I always thought it was Amitabul, but it's Amitabul. It means rising, I think, or raising.
It's
Awakening. Sorry, awakening. That's what it means.
It's Korean vegetarian, which would make this episode of Car Con Carne sin carne, because we are without carne.
Sans carne?
Sans carne, whatever kind of Spanglish way you want to use to describe it. But you are healthy, and you're trying to make me a better man.
As I remember when I first met you, you were a vegetarian, correct?
I was.
What happened?
I completely fell off. I stopped eating meat a long time ago because I thought it was messing up my body, and it probably was, but I didn't feel good after I ate. I always felt kind of sick to my stomach. I thought, what if I just stop? And I did for a very long time. And then I started doing a lot of business travel, and I'll never forget, I was at a client dinner, and the client, this was in Toronto, the client wanted to go to Ruth's Chris. So I'm sitting there at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse in Toronto, never been before. I started hearing the sizzle of the steak come from across the room because they really intensely heat those steaks. Mm-hmm. And, they serve them on whatever they use to grill them up. And I just said, okay, I'll try a filet today. It's been a while. I'll give it a whirl. And then, the next day I'm having like a gyro, then the beef and sausage combo with giardiniera on it 2 days after that. And I never looked back. And I didn't really feel any physical effects, like negative. I wasn't hurling. I wasn't locked up in the bathroom. And just the meat eating just kind of took.
Well, I was the exact opposite. I was a carnivore and a huge meat eater and a huge eater in general.
Well, I remember when I hate when people say this to me, Johnny, but I remember listening to you when I was much younger, and you looked less healthy than you do now.
I was way less healthy, and I was on the verge of dying. Bobby Skafish used to call me the round mound of sound. And that kind of stuck when I was new to XRT, and I was pretty overweight, grossly overweight for a long period of time. And, things happened, and I think the impetus for me was my father passed away, and he was 66, and I looked at his life, and then I compared it with mine, and he wasn't overweight. He wasn't a 2.5-pack-a-day smoker. He wasn't doing half the things that I did, and I was sort of heading in that direction. So it took me a little while, about a year and a half, to kind of right the ship, to kind of hit the rudder and then sort of move in that direction.
And when was that, like mid-'80s?
About 87. My dad died in 86, so in 87, 88, I started trying to eat healthier and work out and change a lot of things. And you'd be surprised when you're that big. I was like roughly 300 pounds. The weight
I can't
comes
even imagine,
off.
Looking at you now.
Oh, I have photos.
Oh, what do you think of when you see those photos?
I'm not that guy. And that was kind of a scary guy and kind of a pretty frightened guy. So that's what I used as sort of protection, as a lot of people, fat people do, from what I've been told. And I know that was the case with me. But, I'm not that guy, and it took a while, and it just sort of like you falling back into meat, it was sort of me falling in that direction and getting more intense with it. To the point where I met a woman who taught me about eating raw food, and I was in conjunction with working out. I was down to the point where people were saying, you're looking a little too skinny. But I balanced it off, and now I became vegan. I was vegan for a long, long time. I still like to eat that way, but I ended up getting married like about 10 years ago, and my wife eats meat and dairy and things like that. So that stuff was in the house. I ended up becoming more or less vegan/vegetarian, so I do let some dairy back in my diet. It's generally in the form of sweets.
So like ice cream?
Not so much ice cream, but cakes and pies and things like that. And then the other aspect is my heritage is Greek, so I let Greek yogurt and feta cheese back in my life. That's probably the only cheese I
do love feta cheese.
Feta cheese is the best.
A Greek salad?
Oh, my God. They're awesome. Sanders, that's a place that we could...
over on like Devon?
It's on Toohey.
That's
and
in Nile Center.
You were a Jack's guy.
I was Jack's in high school on Toohey Avenue. Jack's was 24 hours.
Right.
And that was the place we went after a night of hard partying, misbehaving,
Right.
hope the parents never find out.
And it was
kind
a
of stuff.
smoking place until
totally was.
Skokie banned smoking.
For sure. But that was one of those great places, one of those diners where you can get like a Monte Cristo or an omelet or perch. Like everything's on the menu. It's like a trifold menu, and
I had breakfast there a couple of times when we moved into the neighborhood or fairly close, and I thought the breakfast was good, but I always like the skillets at Sanders. I don't know if you've had those.
I have not.
Where they pile they layer hash browns, and then you could do egg whites. That's another thing that I do eat is egg whites, and then like broccoli and onions and some other vegetables, green peppers on top of that.
I love that. All right, so we're at this place, Amitabul, Bawataba, wherever we are here. And I just followed your lead on this.
Okay.
So you're going to make me a better person.
All right, let's go for it.
I have a bag of stuff. You recommended the pancakes, which are not the pancakes I'm used to.
No, they're not pancakes where you use honey and butter and maple syrup or whatever. They're...
This is how they keep you skinny. You can't open the goddamn
bag. You can't open
bag.
the package.
Yeah. Here. I surrender to you.
Well, I would just do this.
Tear it open.
When in doubt, rip
it
it apart. So there's the kimchi.
So we got maki.
Kimchi maki.
Oh, there are a lot of these.
Yes.
Now, these look great. The maki is
I'm
cucumber.
Telling you, wait till you try the pancakes.
Oh, those actually look amazing. The maki is cucumber, spinach, and...
Avocado,
right. And the pancakes...
Okay, so are we going to try are we going to get all
Did
this?
they really not give us any napkins?
And
I'm in a rental car, so I have nothing.
They didn't.
All right, well,
we'll have to just be careful.
That's what the pants are for.
All right.
And I got myself an apple ginger juice.
All right, these are still hot, but here, take a bite.
Okay. What's in this?
It's black pearl pancakes, so there's vegetables.
This is really good.
I know.
This is super flavorful. Wow.
Dip it into the... This is a kimchi...
I got nothing left to dip.
Oh, okay.
Here we go. I'm going to reach over you here.
Go ahead.
I'm going to try not to spill on your finger. Oh, right on. Johnny, this is really good.
I know. These pancakes are awesome.
And I'm having apple ginger juice.
Is that good?
Yeah, I love the taste of ginger.
Yes. Not when it's not too tart.
Actually, it's more gingery than apple-y. This is quite good. Johnny, I really like this.
Good.
I'm uncomfortable with myself right now.
You can always go back to meat. There's vegans that come in there. I mean, there's people that come in there that eat meat.
I'm going to try a maki.
Try the maki.
Just going to take it without dipping it, without the ginger, without anything else. Wasabi.
It's going to be a little bland.
So am I. Good, very straightforward. So thinking back to those XRT days, those early days.
Yeah.
Was it just, back in the day, like the loop was nuts.
Yeah.
Like, I picture, nudity and mountains of cocaine back in the loop circa 1980. What was it like at XRT back then?
Wasn't quite the same. But it was a lot of fun. That was back when the record industry was nuts, so you had things going on pretty much every night, and record company guys.
I picture a lot of marijuana, a lot of pot smoking going on.
There was a lot of pot smoking. There was a lot of cocaine as well, and there was a lot of booze. So it was rock and roll substances were all over the place. I remember there were different bars that you could go to on Lincoln Avenue where the record company guys hung out. There was also a lot of things going on at Tuts.
Tuts. And
which
where was Tuts? For people
Tuts
who-
is where it was on Belmont and Sheffield, above what's now I think a bank, and now I think Tuts is a hair salon.
Perfect.
But it was what was the name of the place before that? I'm spacing on the name. But it was a legendary club, and then it became Tuts, and that was where a lot of the, late 70s, early 80s British bands came to play. I remember seeing the Psychedelic Furs there. Wow. The Cramps played there when they're not
I love the
British.
Cramps.
Oh, they're awesome. They were the best live. A lot of fun. Who else did I see there?
love the first
Echo
two.
and the Bunnymen. I mean,
Richard Butler's voice still sounds good on stage.
He does. And then there's that Chicago connection with Mars.
Mars Williams.
I met Mars Williams when he was in the I Know What Boys Like, the Waitresses. He was a sax player in the Waitresses.
That's awesome.
When I met him at Touch. So Touch was a scene. And then in '83, Smart Bar opened up. And it was actually upstairs on the top level of that building at 3730 North Clark. And
Which
then
is now like the Top Note Theater.
Right. And I think maybe Joe Shanahan's offices. I don't know. I haven't been up there in a while. But it was originally up there. Then they moved it to the basement, and the basement was a reggae bar for a while.
Reggae bars were a thing on Clark Street
They were.
for a while. There was Exodus, Wild Hair.
Right. And Cool Runnings. That was the bar where the Smart Bar is now. So those were like the hangouts. It was originally Tuts, and then when Tuts kind of went under, then it was the Smart Bar. I wasn't a big 950 guy or Neo.
I always, before I could legally drink, I was always intrigued by 950 only because Iggy Pop name dropped it.
Right.
The Lucky Number Club.
Right.
So I thought, I want to go there. If Iggy Pop knows about it, must be cool.
Right. But, I mean, there were, I dropped in there from time to time, but it wasn't, I don't know why. I guess it's just you gravitate towards where people that you know are.
Sure, of
And
course.
I knew more people at Smart Bar than I did at 950. 950 was a lot of the people from Wax Tracks that hung out there. So, let's see, what else happened? It was just a crazy time. There was so much new music coming out. I was close with Bobby Scafish, and we were the guys that were playing all the new music at the time.
Right.
And then Bobby left and went to the Loop, and then I kind of took over that mantle and got to host the Big Beat, which he started. And I did that
Which
for
is still
17
a very
years.
strong association with you.
Yes, because I think I will probably go down as the guy that's run it the longest. When I left, XRT Marty took over, and he had it for quite a few years, and then it was expanded to 2 hours. And then,
Marty Leonard's, by the way, one of my favorite jocks in the market.
yeah, he's a good guy. Really fun guy. We've known each other for a long, long time. He was originally an intern for Terry Hemmert and was her morning show producer, is how I met him, and he was a student at Columbia College. And then he kind of stayed along at the radio station and was doing stuff behind the scenes. He came up with The Regular Guy, which was a really, and still is, a very funny way of looking at movies from a Chicago guy's perspective. And eventually worked himself into doing all the interviews, hosting the Big Beat, and now when Frankie Lee retired, he's been full-time.
Right.
So, yeah, he's a really good guy, really good friend. And what else happened? Just, things went along. The music was great. The radio station was fun to work at. We played a wide assortment of things from all genres. And then in 1996, we were sold to CBS.
Yeah, that whole period of consolidation and change, arguably not a good thing for the industry.
No, and I kind of look back on it, and it was, Bill Clinton that I had a hand in it. I don't know how much of it was forced from the lobbyists or whatnot, but it's something that really shouldn't happen because it's really made media, what it is today, which is controlled by a handful of people, and that's never a good thing because there's never any diversity. The most diversity you get now is from the listener-sponsored or listener-supported radio stations, the public radio stations, and they're few and far between.
What made you want to go into radio? Was it something you grew up, like at the age of 10 you knew, or was it something you happened into?
It was something I kind of happened into as I eat more of this kimchi.
I'm going to steal more of this pancake. I'm just going to take a huge chunk of this pancake.
Take it.
So I don't have to keep like reaching over you.
Take it. And there's 2 different sauces. If you want to try this one,
That's the hot one. They've got that for the for the maki. It's pretty intense.
That's a homemade kimchi. Kimchi is, I think, fermented cabbage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's homemade.
It's also my stripper name.
That is a great stripper name. Man, now you're talking. I'd pay her a few bucks. I didn't know what I wanted to do after high school. I went to Lane Tech, and I kind of wandered over to Northeastern Illinois University, where I thought I was going to be a teacher. Thought that was going to be the plan.
It's so funny. There was a period of time when I was in college where I thought that's what I wanted to do too. It was radio or education.
Yeah, and I didn't have an idea about radio until I wandered into the radio station at Northeastern, which is still there, WXRT.
Right.
Broadcasting at 88.3 over 10 lovely watts, I think.
Uh-huh.
And while I never got on the air there, I met some really interesting, wild people.
I bet.
I mean, this was 1975, 76, and the management of the radio station were still like sort of hippies, kind of getting together for staff meetings and dropping acid, and I was this innocent kid was like, what the heck is going on here? I never got on the air, but I got to play around in the production studio and cue records and use the mic, and I was fascinated by it. And after I quit, after a semester, because I was kind of working at a grocery store and trying to do college the way I did high school, I went to Lane Tech, but I was able to work my way through without putting a whole lot of effort in. In college, that doesn't work too well.
Well, that's kind of the Columbia College model.
Exactly, which is how I ended up at Columbia College.
I graduated Columbia without taking a math class.
Yes. Columbia had very limited requirements for core elements of education, but it's still a great school. And how I ended up there, I was out of school. I dropped out of Northeastern. I still had this idea I wanted to get in radio. And the summer of '76, I saw an ad in the Reader for Columbia College, and they were having a summer course in radio broadcasting, and it was taught by, I found out, Al Parker, who is the father of Neil Parker, and he was the news director at XRT.
Love the Parker family.
Yes, they're wonderful. And so I went to the class. It was a 5-week session, and Columbia College was located at the time at Lakeshore in Ohio in a dilapidated building. And after the 5-week class, Al suggested I come back for the full term in the fall. So I went back to college, and I went to Columbia College. And it was there in my first semester I met Frankie Lee, and we became close friends.
So you were both students at the same time?
Yes, but
he
had 2 years at another school. He had 2 years at what was the name of the school? Somewhere on the south side. It was a Christian school. And I think he got kicked out for smoking pot.
That's amazing.
So when I met Frank, he had like the longest, wildest hair. He had this long army trench coat. He looked really sinister. But he and I became fast friends. We ended up hearing about, in the first semester we were there, we ended up hearing about an internship at the Loop. And at the time, the Loop was owned by the Chess family. And it had transitioned. It was going to transition from WSDM, which at the time was the call letter stood for wisdom.
Got it.
Of which there was none. At one point, it was smack dab in the middle, SDM. And they were actually an innovative station. They were the first station to have all-female disc jockeys back in the early 70s. So they were
that's a historical footnote that I think has been lost in time.
I know, completely. There's a number of women, I can't think of any of them off the top of my head, who are still in Chicago, may not be on the radio, but who were part of that radio station and playing rock music.
And in 2016, it seems unthinkable that there would be a
And
station
there's the
involved.
great and wonderful man, Bert Burdine, who is a local programming legend who is still around, and I've had breakfast with him at Sanders. Actually, he's a Skokie resident. Really good guy. He was teaching at Columbia College, and so Frank and I signed up to take his class. And after we signed up, we found out that Terry Hemmert was going to be teaching there for the first time, and we couldn't get out of Bert's class because Bert was a friend and a colleague, and he knew who we were. So we interned together at the Loop as a transition from SDM to the Loop, and we stayed there for 2 years. And in the 2 years I was there, I finished 2 years at Columbia College. Frank graduated, and the people that were running the Loop had a station in El Paso called The Pass. And they sent Frank down there to work, and they kept me on staff at the Loop.
I don't think I knew any of this.
You didn't?
Not that you spent any time at the Loop.
I spent 2.5 years as an intern. But one of the oddest things, when they sent Frank to Texas, they put me on the air part-time, having had no experience at all.
So what year was this?
This was the summer of '78.
So the Loop was brand new. It was less than 2 years old.
Right. And it was actually kicking ass. It was independently owned, and they were going up against the Bob Pittman programmed KQX, which had Harvey Wells and Mitch Michaels as jocks. And one of the things that they did completely wrong, they came on like gangbusters and were commercial free for like a month, which was a big thing back then to not play commercials. But they were automated. So
back then
they had the disc jockeys recording their vocal parts, and then they had the music on carts, kind of this big carousel of carts that would kind of throw it in as it was supposed to play. Unfortunately, they had these aging engineers who were union guys who had to run things, so the jocks would intro the Doobie Brothers and Fleetwood Mac would play.
That's fantastic.
And that would happen all the time.
That's fantastic.
So they finally ended up hiring or having interns sit in there and watch and make sure that the right song got played. But Q101, there was Q101 or KQX on one end, and then on the other end was WDAI, which was a rock station.
Right.
And the Loop came in and beat them both in the ratings.
Were you Johnny Mars when you started at the Loop, or did you go by a different name?
No, I think I just used a first name. And when I came to XRT, Norm asked me that question, and he said, "Oh, but did your parents always want a dog?" Because he never used the last name.
Sounds like Norm Weiner.
Yeah. No, Johnny Mars was something I came up with on the plane ride back to Texas after being interviewed at XRT. Actually, I came up with John Mars, and then Norm came up with, "What about Johnny?" I go, "I could live with that." And then later...
Because Johnny's the guy you want to hang out with.
Right. And then later I found out, and I didn't learn this in high school French. I don't know why, but "J'en ai marre" means I don't care, which is kind of a perfect rock and roll.
That is fantastic.
J'en ai marre.
Say it again.
J'en ai marre. We're having Korean and French and
it's like the United Nations coming alive in this rental car.
Yep, in a Japanese rental car eating Korean food.
That's right. So it was the weirdest thing. I was at a Mariano's in Glenview.
Yeah.
And I was there with my kids, and we just finished shopping, and I got them all situated in the car, and I popped the trunk, and I was loading all the groceries in. Suddenly I hear a boom, and the car rocks back toward me. A car trying to park just went too fast and too hard and slammed into my car trying to park. It was really weird, and
nobody got hurt. Your kids were okay?
No, that was the first thing I checked. I flung the doors open. Are you okay? Can you move your neck? All good. But it took like a month and a half to resolve, which is
why you have a rental.
Which is why I have a rental car.
Badly damaged on the front of your car?
The bumper was messed up and kind of knocked out of line. I suspect it'll be an easy fix.
Yeah, but yours is in the shop.
The Mazda 3, which is also home to the magnet I put on the car to let people know that this is Car Con Carne recording in here. I've got a car magnet.
That's good.
Oh yeah,
promotion.
All right, so you were Johnny Mars.
Right.
You interviewed at XRT. Norm said you don't want to be a dog.
So I came back to work at XRT. Interestingly enough, I was in Texas and for a year and a half, and the situation there had sort of deteriorated. Frank and I had been sent down there. He went in the summer, and I went in the fall of '78. And I immediately had the most miserable life a person can have. I worked from midnight to 6.
Overnights are the worst.
And I was the music director. So at the time, there was no internet. There was no, the filing system was a little box of index cards with every song on them. And then...
That's old school.
Yes. And then you would have to manipulate the cards, put them back in an order. Every day you came in, there was a stack of cards with rubber bands on them from different people's shows, from different shifts. So you would have to file them back in the index card box and then hand out more songs for them to play in their next shifts. So that was something I looked forward to whenever I finished the air shift. So I would get off the air at 6. I'd get a breakfast, Grand Slam breakfast at the Denny's.
Yeah, you would.
And then come back and work till 3 in the afternoon.
Oh my God, that sounds awful.
And then go and basically pass out at home, wake up at 10:30. I lived a couple blocks from the station, take a shower, and then come in and do it again. Get in about 11, have to do production, and then work midnight to 6 and stay there till 3. I did this for about 3 months, and I was about ready to quit because you know what I was making? A big $110 a week. And that's radio, kids. If you want to do
Johnny,
radio,
back then, isn't that the equivalent of like $500,000 a year in modern currency?
It really went far in Juarez, though. I got to tell you, $110 a week gets you a lot in Juarez. But they mercifully changed my shift to 10 to 3, so it made it a little bit better.
God, overnights, I found working over, and some people can do it. Some people have that third shifter.
It's a young person's game.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever been more depressed and just off my game as when I did overnights.
I don't think I could ever do overnights now. I don't think that if it was offered to me. I have a hard time. I hate to say this because I have a hard time doing 8 to midnight.
Once you cross the 10 p.m. threshold, it's like, really?
Oh,
am I in college
I'm like
here?
One of those guys. I've gotten used to a lifestyle where I get up at like 5:30 in the morning. So when anything that doesn't get me to bed by 9:30, 10 o'clock, and I'm up till like, you get done at 12, so you don't get home till 12:30, quarter till, and then you're kind of still wired. Next thing you know, it's like 1:15, 1:30 before you fall asleep.
Okay, when I did nights at Q101, I would get home at like 12:30 or 1 a.m., and I was wide awake. I mean, forget it. I was just, answering phone calls all night, just busy doing a show. I would spend 2 hours or so playing Zelda on the Nintendo.
That's good.
And I remember one morning trying to go to sleep, and my head was kind of like swirling in circles, and it was like everything I'd just seen on the screen, like that three-dimensional walkthrough of a boss level. My head was just kind of disoriented from sitting in front of the video screen for that long after being up all day and then all night doing an air shift.
But you know what I think is that's pretty bad. Overnights is bad. 2 to 6, that's kind of was the standard overnight shift. 10 to 2 is a really bad shift.
It is.
10 at night till 2 in the morning, because you're done at 2 in the morning, and the only thing that can happen is trouble, because you're going to go to a 4 o'clock bar.
Right.
You're not going to just go home.
Or get a hooker.
Yeah, drive down to Belmont and get a hooker. But it made my life really miserable, because I would go to, I was self-imposed. It wasn't anybody putting a gun to my head. I would go out to the 4 o'clock bars and then inevitably go to somebody's house. And then it's like 8 or 9 in the morning that you're coming home. And you're like, oh, what did I just do? And then you're trying to sleep.
Forget it.
Yeah, that was not a lot of fun, that shift. So I came back to XRT after an arduous interview process that took about 6 months, because I was dealing with Norm Weiner. And, he kept putting me off. I started applying for the job in the fall of 79. Yeah, late fall of 79.
Here's the thing. You're talking about 1979. I'm looking at you now. There's something to be said for eating healthy. You don't look like someone who was pitching a radio gig in 1979.
Well, that's nice. Yeah, that does help. Eating healthy, working out, that does help. Although I know that the damage that I've done to my body doesn't get replaced or repaired. My doctor told me, those years that you smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day, your lungs are still a little messed up from that. They're never going to kind of regenerate.
Right.
We're not living in that world yet. So, yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's fun. That's one of the things that keeps me doing it and keeps me active in it, is that it doesn't. I just turned 59. So
Damn.
I'm gonna be 60 next year. I remember how freaked out I was over 40. So
do you get the senior discount at Sanders?
I haven't asked yet, but I should.
You
I know
totally
there
should.
isn't one here, but
Not at
because
Amitabul.
this is the fountain of youth here.
It is yeah, they've got weird like Tibetan monk music or
Yes, they do. They have bells and Sherpas waiting to take you to your car.
So all right, and then XRT, you got the gig.
Right. And I started there, and it was intimidating, I have to say. I was there. I was hired to do 11 to 2 a.m., and that expanded to 10 to 2. And unfortunately, a lot of stuff happened. My first year, I was on the air when John Lennon was assassinated and had to deal with that. And that was the first bit of press I got. Yeah, it was a weird night. I remember I was dating somebody, and her grandmother had died, and I remember being kind of in mourning over that. And then I wander into the radio station, and Skafish rips something off the wire, which is what we did.
That's a thing that actually happened back then.
Yeah. And he shows me the wire copy from the AP that says John Lennon's been shot in New York City, and then a few minutes later, bells go off, and he gets the note that John Lennon's been assassinated, and he's done. He's off the air at like 10, and I'm
like, here you go, Johnny.
Yeah, here you go. And, I just opened the phone lines and took calls from people, not on the air, but, we never did that at XRT, but just talking to people, and just everybody was in shock and crying and just, an unbelievable event. And I played respectful music around that, whatever was I felt would work. And, I did what I thought I was crying and mourning with people, but I guess that was the connection, back then. That was what people were looking for, was that was the radio at its core was uniting people,
I want to fast forward a bit. It's worth mentioning, I'm not the one who got you fired.
I know that. I never blamed you, and I found it funny how it all worked out. You should tell that part. You got hired at XRT when? And it was in 2001?
It was 2000. It was end of 2000, 2001.
Right. And I know that one of the things that happens with corporations is they like to cut costs. So I think the way I remember it, or the way I was told it, never anything formally, just all hearsay, is they really didn't want a music director that was off the air.
Which is definitely where things were heading at that time.
Yeah, and that's what was going on at XRT forever. All the music directors were never on the air. Or if they were on the air, it was just part-time fill-in in an emergency situation.
But Lynn was on the air, wasn't he?
Part-time fill-in initially, and then it was only in an emergency situation. But you were hired eventually to kind of be the music director and then be on the air. And then it was a choice that Harvey made, and I still don't know the full story. It could have been Harvey, it could have been Norm. Norm's always played it close to the vest, but he did apologize to me. He did sit me down, and he said that was the dumbest movie ever made after I came back to work part-time. But when I was forced out, it was kind of all Harvey's doing. I think he was more a fan of Bobby's than he was of mine. And I, a few times, had gotten into Harvey's face with a few things.
Well, and that's interesting, because I think a lot of you guys and gals came up. There was always this image of the XRT team as a family. So there were probably less boundaries in that building than there would be at other, let's say, corporate offices.
Correct.
You probably felt a little more emboldened to challenge Harvey than, say, someone would at Bank of America to his manager.
Correct. And the funny thing was that up until that point, we had been owned by Danny Lee, who was always in the corner office. And if you needed something from him, you would go and ask him. Or if you, wanted to do a promotion, Norm or the programming department would go in and ask him. And then it became a situation where we didn't know who was in charge. It was a faceless guy from New York who would come in so often, and and then we became under the thumb of Mel Karmazin, who was notorious for his model for the salespeople is you do the best that you can, and then you succeed. You have the greatest success in the station's history, and then next year you got to make 20% more.
Right.
So
good luck with that.
Yeah, good luck with that. And if you can't do that, then you got to cut costs. And so you kind of turn into a situation where we can get rid of that nighttime guy who's been here and is making a high salary because he's given a service for 21 years, and people seem to like him, and put somebody in that's going to do 2 jobs, and we don't have to pay him as much or whatever it was. And I don't know, if that's how it played out, but that's kind of the thought process.
It was an interesting time.
How long did you last there? What were you there?
Johnny.
I don't mean it that way,
It was 9 months. I'll never forget, they cut you loose. Then they had a staff meeting, and I was invited not to attend. Norm said, well, we are like family, and we just need to kind of come together, understand what's going on. Here it is. They cut you loose. I'm coming in. Rather than, say, okay, here's what's going on. We're all together now. Here's the new plan. I was on the outside the entire time.
I didn't know that part of it.
Oh, the entire time I was there, I felt like I was crashing a party. And it's funny, I got the job at XRT. I'm thinking, wow, this is great. People at XRT are there for decades. I'll grow old at this place. Didn't work out that way.
Yeah.
And oh my God, replacing Johnny Mars in time slot only. I can't even tell you how vilified I was. It was the most demoralizing, debilitating.
I'm so sorry. I didn't know that aspect of it at all.
Oh, you did a little bit.
I knew that you were put in an awkward position. I didn't know that the audience would come in and knife you.
It was brutal. Well, I was the guy who was playing Cypress Hill 2 months prior, and
yeah. Well, that's it. It ended up that we both ended up in a different place, and then you actually encouraged me to apply for the Zone job after you left XRT and went to 94.7 with Bill Gamble and all the old a lot of the old crew from Q101. And for that I'm definitely grateful that you asked me to join there, because it actually what it did was it was a union shop. I never worked at a union shop before, so I was able to get health insurance after a year of employment, and I was there part-time for 3 years, and I knew kind of it wasn't going to end up being anything.
We were all clear on that.
Yeah.
So I'll never forget, after I left XRT, I did something kind of goofy on my way out, and I'm never one to burn bridges. I guess I kind of burned one here. The program director at the time at XRT had an aversion to white cheese, or just cheese in general, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Except on pizza. I think he likes cheese on pizza.
Irony noted.
Boy, I hope he doesn't hear this. I don't care.
Well, this is public information.
Right. Yeah.
So he kept a lot of his stuff in my office because his office was a little cluttered. And in my office was like a dorm fridge where he'd keep all of his soda. I left a block of cheese on top of his soda before I left. It was kind of a goofy little prank. It took on a life of its own. It was the most ridiculous thing. In hindsight, the me of today wouldn't have done that. The me back then was kind of frustrated.
Hey, I remember your life a little bit back then. I heard stories that you would be getting into the office at 8 in the morning as the music director, and then he wouldn't show up till noon or 1, and then have to deal with all the calls that were waiting for him. And you were sitting there waiting for a music meeting to happen. It didn't happen till like 3 or 4, and I think you had one new baby at the time, or were
Correct.
waiting.
Oh no, I was at that point. I had a baby months away. It was imminent.
Right. And you were going home to have dinner with your wife and then having to come back and be on the air.
It was
so
great.
You were there from 8 in the morning till it sounded like my El Paso job.
It was
a little bit,
It wasn't nearly as grueling, but I did this thing, and then suddenly Chicago Magazine does this.
Oh yeah.
Like anniversary retrospective on XRT. It's like at that point it was the 30th anniversary maybe of XRT, 25th. I don't know what it was. And the lead of the story is the cheese thing.
I know. It did take
all
on
this
a life
history.
of its own.
All this history, all these legendary jocks, you and Terry and Lynn and Frank and Bobby, all that stuff got pushed down because of this goofy story from this guy who, statistically speaking, never even worked there. In the history of XRT, I was there for 9 months.
Yeah.
It's like I was never even there.
A blip, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So it was just weird and disappointing all the way around for you, for me.
Yeah, but I saw where they were and what they were. They had done all kinds of things that I really can't get into talking about. Legal stuff towards me that was just ugly. And when they were trying to pass off the last thing to me as kind of a good thing to keep me there in a small effort to keep me there. I just kind of said, it's obvious you guys don't want me here, and I don't really want to be someplace where you're going to treat me like this, so let's part ways. And then I still had to fight him over that, too. Some legal stuff. But, it turned out for the best. I left there. I was gone for 6 years and did the Zone for 3 years, then got into real estate, and then got to 9FM, which was fun for 2 years. And
it was the right idea that just
it was executed poorly, and it could have, if it had a stronger signal, I think it would have been the predecessor to Me TV FM. It was definitely more rock based, which was cool and a lot of fun. I mean, it was just all over the map with music, which more diverse than XRT. I mean, to actually be playing rap songs,
which was new for you.
Yeah, it was fun. So that lasted 2 years, and then ended up in January or March of 2007. Yes, XRT came calling to work part-time fill-in, and
at that point, had enough time elapsed where you're like, okay, I can think about this.
My knee-jerk reaction was no. There's no way I want to go back after the treatment I received. But, in talking to a few friends and talking to a few radio colleagues, they all suggested it would be a good way to keep my name, out there, and you never know, something could happen and you could end up being full-time again. So I went back there, and, it was the audience that kind of responded in such a generous and loving way that just completely blew me away. It was... It was very moving and emotional to have people call you up for like 6-7 months at a time, and they're so happy that you're back and so happy to hear you, and they're glad things worked out, and and that still kind of is remarkable to me, that a radio station could have that kind of impact, or that any individual with what they were allowed to do can have that kind of impact. So that
doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, I'm sure those people are like me; they grew up with you.
Yeah, There's something to that. Yes,
there's
absolutely.
something to going back to the big beat. I mean, you're the guy who introduced people to their favorite bands.
This is true.
I mean, the relationships we all have with music are so profound that when someone is the one who hooks it up...
That's true. And I think of the people that I remember hearing when I was growing up, that influenced me. And I was a big fan of XRT, too, so it was like a dream come true. I mean, I was a Northwest Side kid, and I remember after high school... And when I first started going, when I went to that summer class at Columbia College, I was telling people in my neighborhood that eventually I'm going to work at XRT. I'm going to get a job there. You watch. I'm going to get a job there. And they're like, yeah, right,
well,
sure.
Were you told by teachers, if you want to work in radio, forget it. You got to move. You're never going to make it here?
Not so much. It was never as clear cut as it's become. But the odd thing was, I thought when I got on the air at the Loop part-time that I was going to be able to stay at the Loop part-time and then finish my schooling and then look for a job. But what happened in the fall of that year, somebody left the station in El Paso, and they needed a body down there because the people that were running the Loop were also consulting the station in El Paso. And it was like, you're it. If you don't go, you can't stay here. Right. So it would have been... it was dropped in my lap. Do I want to take this opportunity and get into radio full-time and see what it turns out to be? Or do I want to say no to this and go to school and in 2 years hope that something like
basically
this...
roll the dice.
Exactly. So I, having never lived away from home, an only child to overprotective Greek parents, decide to move, thousands of miles away and live on my own for the first time. And it worked out.
It totally did. Yeah, I'd be remiss having you in the car not asking, what music moves you?
What music moves me? I'm a huge fan of, and I came to it late, but the album for me, the Touchstone album, is Beach Boys' Pet Sounds.
Interesting.
Still is. And I think it's a timeless record. So any band that sounds sort of like that, one of the new bands that I've discovered, thanks to actually Jason Thomas turned me on to him. He gave me a copy of the CD. You heard the Lemon Twigs?
I've not.
19-year-old brothers from Long Island whose parents were musicians, and they schooled them right. They really sound like that kind of choral pop sort of sound.
So you still get excited when you hear music?
I do when it's, I have to say that I'm not really excited by a lot of things that are out there now, and I don't want to make the sweeping generalization that I think music was better back then than it is now, because I'm sure there's a lot of things there are really, really good. My time is not as open to exploring and finding new things, mostly because a lot of stuff is available as a stream.
Yeah.
You don't get to hold the physical product, which is, I think, a great loss for today's youth, that you don't get to hold the physical album.
Going to the record store is something they don't get to do.
Exactly. I
That was my weekend.
Oh, and it's still there, Rolling Stone in Norwich. I used to go
One of the
there all
loudest
time.
places in the general area.
Absolutely the greatest. And
I got all my good bootlegs from Rolling Stone.
all the little stores that were around, all the little indie stores that were around that I used to go to growing up on the Northwest Side, and you'd go into Rolling Stone and they'd have that $5 bin, and occasionally they'd throw a new record in there or an old record in there for $5, and you just grab it. And that's kind of a lost deal with the way things are now. So I don't get to hear a lot of new stuff, and I think there's also this like lemming hipster factor that if something is like, some website who shall remain nameless deems it something, everybody flocks to it. Or
See, and this leads to a question I've asked myself, I've asked of others, I probably said it to the point where people are sick of me asking it, but how do you discover music these days? I mean, back in the day, there were really clear-cut, trusted curators and ways of discovering music.
Right.
The irony, everything ever created is available. Anything you want is.
Right.
But how do you tunnel through and find that stuff?
That's-
You don't get to hang out at the record store. You don't get, sure, the big beat exists, and there are jocks like you and Marty who exist who, turn people on to stuff, but it's hard to
It really is. And I think the fact that everything is available, and I think that everything is potentially DIY for a lot of musicians, and there's a lot more stuff to sift through. So maybe somebody younger than me would be willing to do that, but I'm just not at the point where I want to sift through YouTube and try to find, the newest sensation. Or
I spend a lot of
find it.
time on Bandcamp just listening through local bands. Mm-hmm. But I have to set aside time to do it.
Yeah.
Like, for me, that's Sunday night. When I'm working on my local music show, I'm spending a lot of time on Bandcamp.
Yeah.
Going through whatever has been newly released from Chicago.
Yeah. Gone are the days when I could walk into Reckless and get like a handful of new things that I thought were interesting and have somebody behind the counter say, hey, check this out. Or, go into Wax Tracks and have them tell me about some things and find some things that I've been reading
And when you say
about.
have them, you generally mean someone who is from My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult. Or,
Yes, exactly. Somebody that's
Chris
in a band.
Connolly, or- yeah.
Chris Connolly, or Frankie Fun, or a number of people that were working at the stores. Jim Nash himself would turn me on to things, and I remember bringing things to him and showing him what was going on. Some bands that were on indie labels at one point now are on major labels, and he would give me this little ironic smile over seeing how maybe they sold out.
That's amazing.
But where do you do that now? I mean, there's still some Reckless is still around, and there's ways to buy stuff online, I guess, but there isn't that neighborhood store you could just walk into and find a record, or
I would walk the aisles like a zombie, especially as a kid with nothing else to do.
Right.
Like, that would be a Saturday afternoon.
Right. And back then, I remember they were also kind of a combination head shop too.
Yep.
So you could get roach clips and
When I first
rolling
moved,
papers.
When my parents first moved us to Skokie from Chicago, I was 7 years old. We lived one block down on Main Street in Skokie from a place called Merlin's Magic Music. There were K's instead of C's, which, very apropos of the time. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was explained to me later. It was a head shop, but it's also where I bought Kiss Alive 2. Mm-hmm. And the dual 7-inch of We Are the Champions and We Will Rock You.
Nice.
Yeah, good memories.
Nice. Great memories.
All right, so Johnny Mars, we can hear you on XRT.
On Sundays, every Sunday, 10 to 3.
Should I
10
say
a.m. to 3.
XRT?
XRT. Yes. And then fill in, usually Saturdays, noon to 3. I have been the regular fill-in host for Wendy on Flashback, which is a lot of fun for 4 hours if it's the right year. If it's
For years running, that's been one of the best shows on the air.
It's fun. It's really fun to do. It's like you get to like pull out all kinds of arcane facts of the year. Mostly the best years are the 70s, late 60s, some early 90s. But when you get into 94, 95, you're talking really stretching it to try to find something. I think Wendy's doing 97 for the first time.
Which was
Saturday.
a terrible year for music.
Was it? I
It
don't
was.
remember even anything
Terrible
from
year for
97.
music.
When you look at the listener poll and it's the Rolling Stones' "Dirty Work" as like one of the top albums, you know that things are going to be bad.
Nothing good comes from that.
Yeah, or "Bullets to Babylon" or whatever their
Bridges.
album. Bridges to Babylon. Yeah.
All right, Johnny, thank you for sharing vegetarian food with me.
Oh, thank you. This was delicious and a whole lot of fun.
It was, and it's funny, as we were waiting for our food, I said, "Oh, so you've been married a couple years?" You said, "No, 10.
Coming up to 10.
And it occurred to me the last time we ate together was right before you got married, and in my head that was just a couple years ago, but it's been like a decade. So we should do this more often.
I am all for that. So,
Yeah.
and we live close to each other now, so we can do it easily.
At Sanders.
Exactly.